The voice came from the supply closet at 2:47 a.m. It wasn't singing, it was transcendence. A pure crystalline soprano that turned a Whitney Houston ballad into a prayer. The kind of voice that could make angels weep and stadiums stand. But the woman holding the mop didn't belong on a stage. She belonged in the shadows, scrubbing the marble floors of Sterling Media headquarters while the powerful slept. Her name was Aisha Monroe. She was 43 years old, with hands rough from bleach and eyes that held galaxies of buried dreams. She wore a faded blue janitor's uniform 2 sizes too big, her hair wrapped in a simple scarf, her sneakers held together with duct tape. Nobody at Sterling Media knew her name. Nobody asked. Janitors were invisible. That was the point. Hello, friends. Welcome to Black Bite Stories. Before we begin today's story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our global family. But tonight, Aisha thought she was alone. The executive floor was supposed to be empty, so she sang. She sang the way she used to sing at the Apollo before life broke her, before the medical bills, before her daughter's diagnosis, before pride became a luxury she couldn't afford. The mop moved in rhythm. Her voice soared. For 3 minutes, she wasn't a janitor. She was Aisha Monroe, the girl from Harlem who almost made it. The girl who chose motherhood over stardom and never looked back. The girl who now cleaned toilets to pay for her daughter's chemotherapy. What the hell is this? The voice cracked through the hallway like a whip. Aisha's song died in her throat. She spun around, nearly dropping the mop. Standing in the doorway of his corner office was Marcus Sterling himself. The Marcus Sterling, billionaire, media mogul. The man whose face graced Forbes covers and TED Talk stages. He was 38, devastatingly handsome in his tailored Tom Ford suit, his tie loosened after 16 hours of crushing competitors. His dark skin gleamed under the fluorescent lights, his expression carved from pure contempt. He looked at Aisha the way someone looks at a cockroach. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," Aisha stammered, stepping back. Her heart hammered. She needed this job. God, she needed this job. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'll be quiet." Marcus walked toward her with the slow, predatory stride of a man who had never been told no. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the mop bucket, the dirty water, the discount cleaning supplies she had to buy herself because the company cut the janitorial budget. "You're making noise," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're disturbing my workflow. Do you know how much money I make per hour? Do you have any concept of what your little concert just cost me in lost concentration?" Aisha's hands trembled. "I apologize, sir. It won't happen again." Marcus tilted his head, studying her like a specimen. "What's your name?" "Aisha. Aisha Monroe." He didn't recognize it. Why would he? He had 3,000 employees. Janitors didn't make it into his mental database. "Aisha," Marcus repeated, tasting the name like vinegar. "Let me explain something to you, Aisha. This building runs on excellence, on discipline, on people who understand their place and do their jobs without turning my headquarters into a karaoke bar. Do you understand your place?" The words hung in the air, ugly and heavy. Aisha felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. Exhaustion from 16-hour shifts. Exhaustion from smiling through disrespect. Exhaustion from being invisible until someone needed something to kick. "I understand my place," Aisha whispered, looking at the floor. Marcus nodded. "Good. Then pack up your cart. Security will escort you out. You're terminated." Effective immediately. The world tilted. Aisha's vision blurred. "Please," she choked out, stepping forward. "Please, Mr. Sterling. I have a daughter. She's sick. I need this job. I'll never sing again. I'll be silent, please." Marcus looked at her tears with the detached curiosity of a scientist. "That's not my problem," he said. "You violated company policy. Disturbance during work hours. I'm sure you'll find another building to clean. New York is full of them." He turned his back on her, walked back to his office, didn't look back. Aisha stood alone in that hallway, clutching her mop like a lifeline, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. She thought about her daughter, Zara, 9 years old, leukemia, 3 months of chemo left to go. The medical bills were already crushing her. Without this job, without the healthcare rider she barely qualified for, Zara wouldn't make it to Christmas. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Marcus Sterling exactly who she was, what she had sacrificed, what she had built with her own hands before the world forgot her name. But pride was a luxury. Survival was all that mattered. Security arrived 10 minutes later. 2 bored men who escorted her to the service exit like she was a thief. They took her ID badge, her locker key. They didn't take her dignity because they assumed she never had any. Aisha walked out into the freezing November night with her coat unbuttoned and her soul shattered. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She didn't call her sister. She didn't call her pastor. She called the one number she swore she'd never use. "Monroe Legal." A crisp voice answered. "This is Aisha," she whispered. "I need you to pull the files. All of them. The Sterling acquisition. The clause. Everything." There was a pause. "Aisha, are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." Aisha looked up at the gleaming tower of Sterling Media, 40 stories of glass and steel built on ambition and arrogance. She thought about Marcus's face, the way he looked at her like she was nothing. "I'm sure," she said. Her voice didn't shake anymore. It's time he learned what invisible really means. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Marcus Sterling strode into the mahogany-paneled conference room with the confidence of a man who owned the world. He did own this world. Sterling Media was his empire, built from a single radio station into a multimedia conglomerate worth $4 billion. He sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his executive team, CFO, coup, general counsel, all brilliant, all loyal, all terrified of him. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, opening his leather portfolio, "let's talk about the Q4 projections. I want to see aggressive growth. I want to see blood in the water." The door opened. Marcus didn't look up. Probably some assistant with coffee. "Mr. Sterling," his general counsel, David Chun, said slowly. His face was white. "We have a problem." Marcus finally looked up. Standing in the doorway was a woman he didn't recognize. She was black, early 40s, wearing a navy Armani power suit that probably cost more than his car. Her hair was styled in elegant lokes, her makeup flawless, her heels sharp enough to kill. She carried a slim leather briefcase and an expression of cold, surgical focus. Behind her were 2 men in matching suits, lawyers, expensive ones. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded. The woman smiled. It was not a kind smile. "My name is Aisha Monroe," she said, walking into the room without permission. "But you wouldn't remember me. We met last night." I was holding a mop. The room went dead silent. Marcus stared at her. His brain couldn't reconcile the images. The janitor in the hallway. This woman in the $3,000 suit. "Excuse me," he said slowly. Aisha set her briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. She opened it and pulled out a thick folder bound with a red ribbon. "Let me refresh your memory," Aisha said, her voice clear and strong. "Last night you terminated my employment as a janitorial contractor for singing while I worked. You told me I didn't understand my place. You called security. You had me escorted out like trash." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't have time for revenge theater." Security. "Sit down, Marcus," David Chun whispered urgently. His hands were shaking. "Please, just listen." Aisha pulled out a document and slid it across the table. It was old, yellowed at the edges, covered in legal text. "This," Aisha said, "is the original acquisition agreement from 2019. Do you remember 2019, Marcus? The year you bought Monroe Communications?" Marcus's blood turned to ice. Monroe Communications. He had acquired it for pennies on the dollar. A struggling radio network on the verge of bankruptcy. He gutted it, rebranded it, folded it into his empire. It was one of his first major wins. "What about it?" He said carefully. Monroe Communications was founded by my father, Aisha continued. Her voice didn't waver. Elijah Monroe. He'd built it from nothing. 3 radio stations across Harlem, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. When he died of a heart attack in 2018, I inherited the company. I was 34 years old, grieving and desperate to keep his legacy alive. But I was also a single mother with a sick daughter and no business experience. So when you offered to buy me out, I said yes. Marcus's mind raced. He remembered the deal. Some weeping widow who couldn't run a lemonade stand. He paid her $500,000 and a seat on the advisory board she never used. Clean. Simple. Done. But, Aisha said, her eyes locking onto his, "You didn't read the fine print, did you, Marcus?" She pulled out another document. This one was highlighted in neon yellow. Section 12, subsection E, the Founder's Retention Clause. If the acquiring party engages in discriminatory employment practices that result in the wrongful termination of a Monroe family member, all transferred assets revert to the original owner. Immediately, completely, no appeals. The room erupted. The CFO knocked over his coffee. The coup stood up so fast his chair fell backward. David Chun put his head in his hands and whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus grabbed the document. He read the clause once. Twice. His hands started to shake. "This is insane," he said. "This clause is unenforceable." "It's a joke. It's ironclad," Aisha's lawyer said, stepping forward. "Written by Monroe Legal, the same firm that handles your prenuptial agreements. You signed it without a single edit. Your lawyers approved it. And last night, when you terminated Ms. Monroe based on your personal disdain for her appearance and her choice to sing while working, you triggered the reversion." Marcus shot to his feet. "I didn't know she was a Monroe. I didn't know she owned anything." "She was a janitor." "Exactly," Aisha said softly. "I was a janitor. I took that job 6 months ago because my daughter's medical bills were drowning me. The sale money was gone. The advisory board paid nothing. I needed health care. I needed survival. So I scrubbed your floors. And you never once looked at me long enough to see my face." Marcus felt the walls closing in. "Why?" he demanded. "Why take a janitorial job in your own building?" Aisha's eyes glistened. "Because I wanted to see what you built with my father's legacy. I wanted to understand the man who promised to honor his vision, and instead turned it into a profit machine. I worked here for 6 months, Marcus. I cleaned your office. I heard your calls. I saw how you treated people. And last night you looked at me like I was nothing. You fired me for having joy, for being human. You told me to understand my place." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "So now I'm going to teach you yours." The legal process moved with terrifying speed. Aisha's lawyers had filed the paperwork before she even walked into the board meeting. By noon, every major news outlet had the story. Billionaire CEO fires janitor, loses company. The optics were catastrophic. Marcus Sterling, the media darling, the self-made success story, had been undone by his own cruelty. The man who preached excellence and discipline had ignored a clause in his own contract. The board met in emergency session. The vote was unanimous. Marcus was out. The company reverted to Monroe Communications under Aisha's control. $2.3 billion in assets. 3,000 employees. 40 years of her father's dream returned. Marcus sat alone in his corner office, the one Aisha used to clean, staring at the termination papers. He had lost everything. Not because of a bad investment. Not because of a market crash. Because he saw a black woman with a mop and decided she was beneath him. He didn't even fight it. What was the point? The contract was airtight. The story was everywhere. His reputation was ash. He packed his things in a cardboard box. Walked past the assistants who wouldn't meet his eyes. Took the elevator down 40 floors for the last time. When he reached the lobby, Aisha was waiting. She stood by the security desk, arms crossed, watching him. Marcus stopped. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. "I didn't know," Marcus said finally. His voice was hollow. "Would it have mattered?" Aisha asked. If I had told you I was Elijah Monroe's daughter, would you have treated me differently? Or would you have just found another reason to see me as less than—" Marcus looked at the floor. He had no answer. Aisha stepped closer, her voice steady, but layered with years of restraint and resolve. "You had everything, Marcus. Talent, vision, resources." She paused, letting each word land. "But you forgot the one thing my father taught me early in life, that excellence without empathy is just cruelty in a suit." Marcus scoffed at first, but the sound died in his throat when she held out an envelope. It was plain, unmarked, heavier than it looked. He took it with trembling fingers and slid the contents free. His breath caught. Inside was a check for $500,000, the exact amount he had paid her in 2019, the hush money disguised as a consulting bonus when she'd begged for flexible hours to take her sick daughter to chemotherapy. "What is this?" he whispered, suddenly small in a glass-walled boardroom that once made him feel untouchable. "Your severance," Aisha replied calmly. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm not a monster." Her eyes met his, unflinching. "I'm just someone who believes people should be seen. All people. Even the ones holding mops at 3 a.m. Marcus stared at the check, then at her, really looked at her for the first time. Not the janitor he ignored. Not the inconvenience he dismissed. But the woman who now owned the company he once ruled. "What are you going to do with Monroe Communications?" he asked, his voice hollow. Aisha smiled, not triumphantly, but with quiet certainty. "I'm going to run it the way my father would have. With integrity, with respect." She turned toward the windows overlooking the city. "And the first thing I'm doing is launching a program that guarantees full health care coverage for every contract worker in this building, cleaners, security, night staff. Because nobody should ever have to choose between their child's life and their dignity." 3 months later, the transformation was undeniable. Monroe Communications was reborn, not just rebranded, but rehumanized. The executive floor was renovated, but so were the policies. Salaries were audited. Raises were given. The janitorial staff received benefits, paid leave, and something many of them had never known in a workplace before: respect. And every Friday at exactly 2:47 a.m., if you walked past the corner office, you could hear singing. Soft at first, then full. Gospel, soul, echoes of a dream that had never truly died. Aisha never stopped cleaning. She just did it as the CEO. She still mopped her own floors, answered her own phones when needed, and greeted night shift workers by name. She reminded everyone who walked through those doors that invisible never meant powerless. Her daughter, Zara, went into remission. The chemo worked. And on Zara's 10th birthday, Aisha took her to the Apollo Theater, the same stage where she had once stood, terrified and hopeful, years ago. That night, she sang not for judges, not for contracts, not for applause, but for her child. The entire theater rose to its feet. Not because she was a CEO, but because she was a mother who never stopped fighting. Marcus Sterling eventually rebuilt his career. He started smaller, humbler, with a podcast about leadership and failure. His first episode was called The Woman with the Mop. He never said her name, but everyone knew. And every year, on the anniversary of that night, he sent Aisha a single red rose with a note that read, "Thank you for teaching me to see." Aisha never responded. She didn't need to. Because the best revenge wasn't destroying him. It was proving that the woman he dismissed as nothing was always everything. She was a Monroe. And Monroes didn't disappear. They just waited for the world to catch up.